Because ultimately, what this perspective is about, it's not about any sin. Obviously, everybody sins. It's about major sins and arguably truncating the list of major sins to what is explicitly threatened in the Quran. And it's about understanding the true nature of the Deen al-Haq, which is peace, and a peace towards the One, a peace towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in this time of Ramadan, we can appreciate what that really means as we shear our nafs, as we fight a jihad. And so the Fasiq is like this unfinished raised bed. It's an incomplete project. It's a project that has begun. Whereas even if Allah is not de facto condemning as kafir agnostic secular people, which is debatable, the evidence seems to be pointing against that, and therefore it's really imperative to do some kind of dawah, even if it's incremental. But even if they are not de facto disqualified as kafir for their lack of monotheism, even a pro forma monotheism, they are not asking for forgiveness. And one thing that we have in common with Catholics is that there's an understanding that even if maybe you might thematically earn forgiveness for things from God, generally speaking, the price of forgiveness is you have to ask for it. And that this is generally celebrated as a very mercifully cheap price. And people who don't believe in God and don't see any merit in praying don't get that. They just don't ask for forgiveness. They may, however, experience toba in the sense of like, oh, I got to get my life together. I need to lose weight. I need to stop smoking so many cigarettes, etc., etc. I need to do better in relationships. And these are breadcrumbs. I should give more in charity. Then you earn some guidance through that, and it can snowball. But generally speaking, we understand that you must repent. And ideally, repent in a way that is directed towards the ultimate reality. And ideally, framing that concept of ultimate reality in the revelations of the prophets. And so, if you have not done this for any major sins that you've committed, and if you've damaged other people, then you need to go and make amends as well. Blood money, if it's an accidental killing, owning up to your spouse if you've cheated on them, things like this. Taking the 100 lashes, which is the correct. There's a reason why that's the reconciliation of John 8. I believe it's John 8 when the Messiah saves the woman of the Rajam punishment, and the original Rajam punishment in the Torah is that it should be punished. It should be a survivable punishment. So you can be a parent, and so you can maybe your spouse doesn't want to divorce you for it. So you take the whip, and there it is. And if they really want to be merciful, they per the sunnah of the prophet Job, Islam, it could be a bundle of grass. So your 100 lashes aren't even breaking skin or causing abrasions. It becomes a symbolic act. And so the question of will a Fasiq perish on the Day of Judgment, or will they be forgiven, or will they be outweighed by good deeds, is an open question. But just as a Muslim, like a mu'min is a Muslim, but a Muslim is not necessarily a mu'min. Therefore, a Fasiq can be a Muslim in name, but they're certainly not mu'min, and they're not, strictly speaking, Muslim in the batin until they are submitting again. So if you are, for instance, addicted to alcohol or marijuana or something like this, and you're like, this is halal, you might be wrong about that, and therefore you're a Fasiq. But maybe that doesn't sink you. Yeah, you might be right about that. And this is the problem with fiqh, is we take these gambles. A lot of people are praying Taraweeh in the Jafari school. That's perhaps a sinful innovation, or at least it shouldn't be mustahab. They can pray nafil outside of congregation. That's a subtle thing, right? Or they're eating Hanafi. A lot of schools they allow you to eat seafood. The Jafari school doesn't. So the same question about many Quranists will smoke weed because they say it's not hamar. Hamar means wine. So hey, or in some schools the Maliki would consider it makruh, and so on, right? We have this reputation of this among the Sufis. Um, so this should not be, being wrong about fiqh is something that most Muslims are going to fall into, but they're doing so in good faith. And then being like, I know it's a sin and I want to quit and I'm trying to cut back. This is at least something. There's at least some, even though you continue to sin, you're at least doing some tawbah. And therefore you're a Muslim in the inside, which is what really matters. Now, in the classical Mutazili sense, it was of significant legal importance because they would not be condoning this sort of Maturidi concept of sinners eventually getting out of punishment, but they wouldn't be liquidating their assets and sentencing them to execution, which was a very extreme thing. So this was a mercy in a sense. They opted away from the Abadi Khawarij position, but they retained the moral backbone, the turpitude, the istiqama that the Murjites gave up when they just went to the masjid and listened to the Muawiyah approved khutbahs. And so at the time, this was actually in the same way that people will say that the Quran seems sexist. Well, it's certainly more feminist than what they were doing in the Jahiliyyah. And likewise, this Mutazili position in the Abbasid revolution period was a breath of fresh air. Now, in modernity, as we have a deeper concept, we can see that the teachings of Imam Ali alayhi salam are, in some sense, attenuating the faithful reading of the Fasiq to Munafiq pipeline that one can clearly extrapolate from the Quran, and tempering it with this concept of Toba, but not going full Muawiyah with it and giving a get out of jail free card. And so we must always be vigilant not to be Fasiq in our deeds. Of course, some of those deeds are going to be there on the day of judgment. You will be shamed by them even if you're forgiven for them. Some of them is something good to ask for on Laylatul Qadr and the dua. Maybe they won't be mentioned. Maybe, it's okay. You did a lot of charity for the refugees. We don't have to bring up all those times you did the whatever. Maybe that's a beautiful gift from Allah that you don't even have to be shamed for it on Judgment Day. But that perhaps, just like the mere forgiveness, would be accompanied by the intention of Toba and some efforts towards it, that erasing it from your record would be a gift commensurate to somebody who really does good, that it isn't worth the time of the angels on the Qiyamah to bring it up, even though it at one point was recorded. Just redact it. It's like the Epstein files, but the Epstein files they shouldn't have redacted, right? That's protecting real sin. And these are real sins too, but these are minor sins, and this is also in the Quran. This is a court of the covenant that if you never engage in major sin, then you'll automatically have your minor sins forgiven. And the Zaydi imams take a position that if they were to delineate what are the minor sins, which presumably is many or most of them, they would be encouraging sin, because people would say, well, I can just do this all my life. But then you commit one major sin, suddenly you've got this, let's say smoking cigarettes is a minor sin, because you're kind of hurting it's not hammer, but you're hurting your lungs. Or let's say even a little drinking or a little smoking of the ganj is not a major sin. Um, and that rather it opens you to major sins to be habituated in it. You're wasting a lot of potential. But then you commit one major sin, and here you got all these little minor sins over the years, and it's like you got your work cut out for you to dig out of that one. So there's something beautiful in the synthesis, and there's something beautiful in the contemplation of what it really means to be a Muslim, independent of an affiliation. So, irrespective of where you stand on the Mutazili in their classical or modern position, or where you stand on Shiism, or where you stand on Quranism, or anything else, inshallah, we're all fasting this Ramadan. And so it would be very useful in your contemplation to take a meditation of what it means to be Muslim with a little m, to be peace upon him being Allah, him being the God. What does it mean to be in the deen of peace? And it's like that feeling you get when you do the right thing. Your conscience is troubling you, and you say, I should call my dad. I should pay that thing. I should try to clear that debt. I should feed those orphans. I can afford to give $50, feed them for one day. I'll do that. I can't afford to give thousands of dollars and feed them for a whole month or months or what have you, but I can do this. Then you do it and you feel at peace. And this calibration, the framework of what is right and why you should do it, is part of being a Muslim with a capital M, but it's also part of a whole bunch of capital lettered ideological affiliations. But what unifies them all is the peace upon him, the reconciliation. There's a relief that comes from the Toba, that you are no longer in trouble, if that's what motivates you, but that you are no longer at odds with reality. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.